Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go after the lefts, we go after the rights, we go after the middle and independents, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, February the 14th, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan. On the Frack We Got Here, we do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast, which means that we do try to get our news from the most reputable sources with award-winning journalism. We do not do sensational news like Fox News or The Blaze or whatever extreme left or extreme right site that people may like. We give you the facts, just the facts, nothing but the facts. And at the same time, guys, we do try to watch our language, but words do fly. At the same time, there'll be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, aside from Happy Valentine's Day, how can we start this news the usual way? A shooting, again, by police, again. However, I feel like this is a story that just keeps coming back up time and time again. But before I get into it, here's the details.
Well, this morning, new police body camera video shows Harris County deputies in Houston shooting a woman inside her friend's apartment after mistaking her for an intruder. Deputies knocked on the door and announced themselves after a neighbor flagged that the screen had been removed and a window was broken. Here's what happened next.
As you can see, the deputies, who it's important to note have edited the video that we're playing for you, say an individual approached the front door with what they say was a gun and fired. Attorney Benjamin Crump says this video is evidence of unnecessary and excessive force. Jason Carroll has the reporting. He's with us this morning. What do you know?
Well, look, what exactly happened here and who ultimately is at fault, if anyone is at fault, is all in likelihood going to be decided by a grand jury. But here's what happened here. It was early Saturday morning. The Harris County sheriffs got a call of a possible break-in at an apartment building in the Cloverleaf area of Houston. When they got there, a tenant directed them to the apartment in question, and they noticed that it had a broken window. Harris County Sheriff says that the two deputies announced themselves, knocked on the door. When they looked through the window, they allegedly saw a woman holding a gun walking towards the door. The deputies opened fire, striking Ibani Ponce. A second woman then came down the stairs with her hands up, begging the deputies not to shoot. Take a listen. Incredible footage there. Investigators learned later that Ebony Ponce was actually staying there with the other resident, and that window was broken because the two had forgotten their keys. They broke through the window so they could let themselves in. Famed civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who has worked a number of cases involving police-involved shootings, including the one involving Breonna Taylor, who I'm sure you guys both remember, who was mistakenly shot inside her apartment by police in Louisville back in 2020. Crump said the following: "This newly released body cam footage is evidence of the unnecessary and excessive force used against her. The video shows the deputy that responded to Ibani's friend's house shot first and asked questions later. We demand that the deputies involved be immediately held accountable." The investigation clearly now is being conducted by the Sheriff's Department and will eventually be turned over to the District Attorney's Office.
Okay, so as you guys can see, another police shooting, another instance, as they say, of action before consequences, or as I like to say, police just like to shoot first and ask questions later. And the details about this, again, are sketchy at best. All I can sit there and say is there is a reason why we kept pushing for police reform. There's a reason why we kept pushing for qualified immunity to be removed. There's a reason why we asked for different police procedures to be updated, because you have sheriff's deputies in Houston who, again, decide to shoot somebody, and you heard from the body cam footage. You barely heard drop the gun before you heard the first 5 shots go through the door window. And again, What's the and again? I have to ask this question: what's going to be the deputies? What is going to be the officer's excuse this time? I hate to be that guy, but what's going to be the deputy's excuse? Oh, well, we saw a gun in her hand and we immediately assumed violence. We immediately assumed she was armed and hostile. This goes back to what I'm saying every time, whether you are a responsible gun owner or whether you're outside the lines. Our police going to treat you any different? Because again, listen to the story that they just said. They approached because of a possible break-in. The owner and their friend didn't have their keys, so they broke in, or I'm sorry, they got in. At the same time, officers when approaching the door did not announce themselves as police officers. They just sat there and said, "Drop the gun as fast as humanly possible," and fired. Yeah, there needs to be accountability, but I don't trust the same sheriff's office that these deputies work for to investigate. At the same time, I don't trust the fact that these deputies are going to be reprimanded because, again, where we stand with the law protects law enforcement better than it protects the victims it hurts. But I could be wrong. Maybe something will be different. But I feel like this is the same old story, which means that those officers will probably get a slap on the wrist, probably still be allowed to be on the force. At the same time, this may go into a civil suit in which the woman may wind up winning, but those officers will still be protecting and serving. But again, tell me how that's right. Because I know a lot of people say, well, the officer has a split-second decision. If you take the time, if you're responding to a break-in or responding to some sort of call, but you're going in hot and heavy already, versus announcing yourself and then going from there, which we can clearly see from the tape, which, by the way, they said that the sheriff's office have already begun to edit. Another reason why I can't trust that, because from that tape alone that we just saw, shows the simple fact of the matter that you didn't announce yourself. You merely walked to the door, saw a person, and instead of announcing yourself or saying, "Hey, drop the gun," you didn't give that person time to react. And let's be honest, do you really have that much time in a split-second decision when you hear a cop say drop the gun while a gun's pointed at you? Do you really have that much time to safely put down the gun so you avoid discharging your firearm? Or do you simply just get shot because what the excuse they'll give is, oh, person was armed. We deemed the threat, we acted accordingly. But you know the messed up part about the whole thing is their supervisors may agree with them. And again, that person is still alive, by the way. Person that did shoot is still alive. But again, where is the police accountability at for their shootings? Because they're quick to pull the trigger, but never in a hurry to do everything else. That's the thing that's always bothered me, really and truly. But we'll follow that story as it goes along. The next story I got, guys, again, is going to be an interesting one because, again, I never thought, well, I've said Joel Osteen's name on the show before, and I've always sat there and said this is the same man during a flooding in Houston who also owns a former basketball arena stadium, now his mega church, who didn't open the doors for homeless people to stay in there because he, quote unquote, had the carpets changed and didn't want them dirty. What a holy servant. Anyway, there was actually a shooting over the weekend at Joel Osteen's church. And aside from the fact that I'm sad that they missed him, I'm not going to apologize for that. I can't stand that man. But aside from the fact that Joel Osteen was missed, there is another part to the story.
At 1:53 p.m., a female, approximately 35 years old, entered the property on the west side here in the parking lot of Lakewood Church. She entered the building. She was armed with a long rifle and a trench coat with a backpack, accompanied by a small child, approximately 4 to 5 years old. Once she entered, at some point she began to fire. I want to compliment the off-duty officers who were working extra employment here. One TABC agent, 4 years of service, 38 years old. An HPD off-duty officer, 28 years old, 2 years of service. Both officers, the officer and agent, engaged, striking the female. She's deceased here on the scene. Unfortunately, a 5-year-old kid was hit and is in critical condition at our local hospital. There was a 57-year-old man who didn't have anything to do with it, I don't think, was shot in the leg. He's seeking treatment in the hospital. So let's all pray for each and every one of them. Once she went down, officers reported back to us that she threatened, that she had a bomb. So we searched her vehicle, our bomb squad, and also the backpack. No explosives were found, but she was also spraying some type of substance on the ground. So HFD came, and the fire chief would speak briefly on that.
Okay, so really, guys, the reason why I pray that was not only the fact that this individual did actually go into Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church, did open fire with a long arm rifle. It was later reported that this person did suffer mental instabilities, that their neighbors tried to alarm local law enforcement that the person in question was having issues, but also was in possession of a firearm as well as having custody of a child. The thing that I don't, and again, get for all these people, because you're probably wondering, well, why am I talking about a person with mental instabilities having access to firearms and being trusted with a child? Well, unfortunately, in the state of Texas, there are no red flag laws. There are no red flag laws. Red flag meaning that unless you have a history of violence, domestic abuse, things of that nature that make you a danger to the community, also mental instability. If you have those things as a previous record, that usually prevents you from getting firearms. In the state of Texas, where they believe everybody should have a firearm, well, those laws doesn't exist. And I know a lot of people are thinking, well, if the red flag laws were in place, would this prevent it? I would say yes, because again, the person had a recorded history of mental illness. At the same time, they had a child in their custody, which again says a lot about the state of Texas and the lack of resources actually making sure the individual does not have the things that can harm them and harm themselves. But at the same time, guys, yes, Joel Osteen got missed. Damn, I'm not gonna feel bad about that. But speaking about things I don't feel bad about, things, guys, like I said before, it is kind of messed up. I mean, shootings, regardless of terrible news, even at a place like Joel Osteen's. I don't think anybody, whether you worship or whether you go to school or anything else, things of that nature. It's just the fact of the matter that shootings are happening way too often. And at this point, this is just screaming that things need to be handled. Things need to be done. And I can go back to the fact of what I said about, inflicting red flag laws, really redoing the way we do gun ownership, doing a national registry, putting warning signs for too much ammunition or things of that nature being purchased. Because yes, you do need to be put on a list. If you have completely thousands of rounds of ammunition, you should go on a list. I have no issue with that. As a person who owns firearms, again, I have no issue with that. If I have 1,000 rounds of ammunition, you damn right I want someone to know I have it. Why? Because again, we're being preventative. The only way we can be preventative. And I know you ammo-sexuals out there, oh, but criminals don't follow the laws. Criminals don't follow this. When are we going to stop using the NRA conservative bullshit line? When are we going to stop using that? Because if you haven't noticed, in the last, multiple mass shootings or attempted mass shootings, it's not criminals. It's people with mental instabilities that have access to firearms and internet sources to basically feed that paranoia is what actually leads to those mass shootings. It's not criminals. As much as people want to say it, it's not. So again, I can go down this whole row of things that need to be done. And whether or not they choose to is going to be something else. But again, I digress. But the next thing we'll talk about, guys, is mainly about my home state of Tennessee, which I call progressively backwards. There are two Democratic representatives there that you really should get to know. And if you've been paying attention to the news over the last year, you do get to know them. I am basically talking about these two gentlemen here, Representative Justin Jones and Justin Peterson behind him. These two not only have made history as far as being Democratic lawmakers to be elected to the House, to the Tennessee House Assembly floor, but they are part of a collective that is trying to change a lot going on in a red state right now. And this is what I talk about, guys, when I say that conservatives, whether at the federal level or at the local level, literally and figuratively don't have shit to do but silence people. Because as of right now, for those two particular gentlemen there, they're trying to put in a bill, and I cannot make this up. Because keep in mind, to give you guys some context, just last year there was a shooting here in Nashville. Both Justins did actually speak. Justin Jones, Justin Peterson, both spoke along with another representative calling for gun reform in Tennessee. State Speaker Sexton and others got to the point because they said they violated decorum, and because of that, both Justins were expelled from the House, while their counterpart, who was spared, Gloria was actually spared. Now, because they were expelled, there was a special election in which both Justins were reelected unanimously back to their houses. Now, with that being said, these two wonderful lawmakers are still fighting the GOP, but the GOP, as far as the Tennessee goes, is trying to put in a bill, and I cannot make this up. One of the bills would prohibit legislators expelled from the General Assembly from holding their seat for 4 years, while another bill would prevent a county legislative body from nominating the expelled member to their former seat. Let me spell that out to you again. They're basically what the GOP is trying to do with these two individuals, or I should say three, because the third one is Gloria Johnson Knoxville. Again, a woman who's a great ally, was also on the chopping block, but somehow was spared. And you could say it because she was white, that she was spared. But the two black lawmakers, again, were expelled, again, were nominated back. And now you have two bills that the GOP is trying to put through, where one sat there and says that would prohibit legislators that were expelled from the General Assembly from holding their seat for 4 years. And while another one would prevent a legislative body from nominating the expelled member from former seat. So what they're basically saying is, and I think this is crazy because, again, this is a bill. It hasn't been put in yet. But imagine you get expelled from the House Assembly. You get voted back in. But let's just say those two bills were in effect. That means that what could wind up happening is that the GOP, including Sexton, could expel members. And if those two bills became law in the state of Tennessee, whether or not you were elected back, I mean, even if you were elected back, you couldn't take your seat if those two bills went into place. And again, this is the part where I sit there and say that Jones and Pearson, Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, when I tell you the truth, they are. And again, this goes back to what I say about Nikki Haley, where Nikki Haley says, "There's America's not a racist country." Really, I live in a state right now that's trying to prevent black people from running, even after they expel them. And you're going to stand and tell me there's no such thing as a racist country, where you literally and figuratively are trying to be a Democratic lawmaker, and at the same time, they're trying to get rid of you. The GOP is doing nothing else. And I say this until a conservative proves me wrong, because whether at the federal level or at the local level, the GOP, the Conservative Party, the Republican Party, whatever you want to call them, have done zilch, zero, spit, nada for the American people. Even in my home state of Tennessee, they're trying to pass a voucher system that nobody wants because they want to destroy public education. They want to make public education so bad that the only option is to privatize it, in which they can give the money that was for federal funds for public schools to give them to private and religious schools. They want to badly because their donors want them to badly. At the same time, it's the first time I can say this going to a voucher system, because school vouchers is bullshit. School vouchers is just a good way to destroy public schools, because people say, well, I want to give my child school choice. I want my child to go to the best schools in the state, or the best schools in their county, regardless of their income, things of that nature. It sounds great on paper, but the problem is, where do you get the funding for that? Because if you ever paid private school tuition, it's a pretty penny. if you've ever went to a religious school, which also has tuition, it's still a pretty penny. These private schools and charter schools are not cheap in any sense of the imagination, but they're not getting federal funding. Public schools are getting federal. Public schools will always get federal funding because they're part of the general education that is guaranteed to every American citizen. And Republicans are saying, how can we get a hold of this money at the same time not make it look like crooks? Enter a school voucher program, which again, Jones and Pearson and many others are voicing their opinions and saying this does not need to happen. This will destroy the Tennessee education system. I mean, it's already in shambles with TCAP and Common Core and everything else and outdated testing standards. But I digress. But they want to destroy public education so bad that privatization is the only answer. And you have individuals like Pearson and Jones and Gloria who are all trying their hardest, along with others, to basically say no. But again, this is what happens in heavily red states. When you have a heavily red state, it is hard. It is like fighting uphill in sandals on snow. And it's a battle. And it's a battle that has to be respected. But also, that's why I keep saying, guys, to stay informed of where you are. Because again, in my home state of Tennessee, it's racist as hell. It's also progressively backwards. And it doesn't help that it's a red state, which means it'll vote against its own interest and yet still somehow complain. But I digress. Anyway, let's get to speaking of things that just make you just want to vomit. I can never say his name. I never want to put president in front of that. Former dictator wannabe, now somehow still skating jail, Trump. Let's just say he's in the news for a myriad of things. The first one, it's still amazing to me that he has the unmitigated gall to do this, that he's literally wanting his case. And keep in mind, Trump is a man of litigation. He will lawyer, go to court, he will sue, he will appeal, he'll go down every practical attorney route he can until there's no more. Now, keep in mind, it wasn't too long ago that the Supreme Court, that the appeals court had ruled that no, you do not get presidential immunity for anything that you were in office for. You're a private citizen, which means that anything they find, you get charged for. Trump has now asked for that case to be looked at by the Supreme Court. And guys,
let's begin with Trump.
When I tell you for the simple fact of the matter, it's amazing to me because how in the world, and I wish I could make this up. I mean, it's right there in black and white that he's filing to the Supreme Court for his claim for presidential immunity because he believes, or he thinks that someone told him, that yes, you should have immunity. You should have immunity from your attempts to overturn the 2020 election, even though the mountain of evidence says otherwise. Or, his documentation, his secret documents that he thinks he can keep because he declassified them, that he thinks he should be able to get that too. And at the same doggone time, he still believes that his Manhattan, now he's found guilty of it, and now it's the ruling's going to come sooner or later, but thought he could be immune to that too. This is the problem with Trump, that he's every napkin's wet dream. At the same time, he's also, besides the fact of an idiot, he's also one that enjoys the spotlight. He enjoys the crowds. That's why I said for a reality star, or in his case, a failed reality star / con man, he can't give up the spotlight. It's why he treats every rally like his greatest hits. It's why he still goes around, and yet somehow, some way, this man still may wind up getting the Republican nomination for president. Because if you think Nikki Haley is going to beat him, I don't see that. I'm sorry. Nikki Haley is not her real name. Anybody that changed their name to sound more white, because Nikki Haley, if you go back, for all those that don't know, who think Nikki Haley is not her real name, she did have a previous name. Her family actually depended on minorities for jobs, for clothing, for housing. They depended on minorities. They didn't have napkins in their favor. And yet Nikki Haley came from that and decided that, no, my name's not going to work. I'm going to change Nikki Haley. I'm going to be as white as humanly possible, which again is the GOP. You know, and it's not just her, because there are certain black people, certain black folks out there that want to be GOP so bad because it comes with money, status, and influence. Don't believe me? Ask Candace Owens. She used to love it. Or ask Stacey Dash. She used to love it. Or ask whatever current bedwench is on Fox News right now. I didn't even bother to think of her name. But trust and believe, she's getting paid for spouting bullshit. But the only thing about Trump is that, again, he also unfortunately has influence. And what I mean by influence is, I want to talk about this before I get to that, which is basically the Senate did pass a $95 billion package with aid for Israel and Ukraine, which means that since, which again, this is the crazy part, the Senate passed it, which again is nuts, and now it goes to the House, which means that for all those that have not been paying attention, we are at war. Well, I'm sorry, we're an ally to Ukraine and somehow an ally to Israel as they're fighting wars on both parts. Ugh. I know this is going to be, for all those that are tired of war, I get it. I understand it. I'm right there with you. But $95 billion in a foreign aid bill to Ukraine and Israel. I've said it on this podcast once more. I'll say it again. I don't know how. Because Ukraine, we are giving military aid. That's where that funding is coming from, while NATO actually gives while the rest of the NATO allies give humanitarian aid. Again, the issue is with Russia. The same thing with Israel, and the other name we can't say because apparently saying the groups of two people somehow get you flagged. But let's just say IMP are beefing. At the same time, guys, here's the thing that I will never understand. And that not only does the Senate, not only does the House, but the presidency, President Biden himself is going to have to, I mean, if I'm asking a question, I have to ask. A $95 billion package on top of the other bills that were submitted to assist Ukraine, to assist Israel, and now another $95 billion. What are you doing for the American people, sir? I have to ask this question because here's the thing. For all those know, this is the breakdown of that $95 billion package. I want to show this real quickly. So here's the crazy part, right? Here's the foreign aid package that the Senate just passed. $60 billion is going to Ukraine. Little over $14 billion is going to Israel. A little over $9 billion of that is humanitarian assistance. A little over $4 billion of that is going to the Indonesia Pacific region. And for some odd reason, we get $7 billion is marked for other. I'm sorry, it's not a grocery list. I think if you're going to give $7 billion of our money, you might want to tell us where it's going to. But here's the problem with this. That is it needed? From a war standpoint, yes. But how do you sell that to the American people who are trying to make ends meet, who are trying to pay bills? Everything is high, income is down. Sure, jobs are abundant, but employers are being picky. And again, goes back to pay. A lot of low-paying jobs will forever be vacant. But we're talking about the jobs that actually can make ends meet, to where employers are being very picky about. At the same time, you have folks like senators and representatives coming up to people and saying, you know what, we need your vote. And if I was interviewing President Biden, I'm sorry, I have to ask, can you justify this to the American people who are struggling right now to watch $95 billion of their own money go overseas? Could you justify that? You can't justify the fact that we had to make sure Ukraine is free. We had to make sure that Israel is free. Which I'm sorry, I'll say it once and I'll say it again. If you look at the history between I and P, it tells a whole different story about who's the villain and who's the victim. That's all I'm saying. Because if anything, I say anything more than that, again, Zuckerberg's of the world will think I'm inciting violence. But the thing I'm getting at is just that when we see that much money flowing out of our state, at the same time the American people are hurting, what exactly is the president doing to alleviate fears here? Because that's the thing I don't get. And you know what Trump said? And again, this, like I said, the only reason why I think this will die in the House is basically because of Trump. Because what Trump said, and I'm going quote for quote here, that Trump sat there and said on his Truth Social, we should never give money anymore without the hope of a payback or without strings attached. The United States of America should be stupid no longer, because he believes. And again, I find this laughable from a guy who sat there and said that we need to start giving out money like it's a loan. Really, Trump? The man who got loans from China? The man who got loans overseas, who in my opinion is the most compromised president since Nixon? And you're going to sit there and say that I don't like this plan because and you're not gonna like this plan because you want America to start loaning out money. We still owe China billions. That loan hasn't been paid back since Afghanistan. But you want to sit there and go, oh, we can't give out no more money without actually making a loan paper. I'm sorry. From a guy who had multiple bankruptcies, I don't think I'll take financial advice from you. But the problem is the GOP will listen to him. The GOP and its representatives will listen. Keep in mind, even though Democrats did get George Santos' seat, they did gain one seat in the House of Representatives, but the GOP still has the overwhelming majority. And trust and believe, a lot of the GOP still follows that crazy ass Trump. And if Trump doesn't like the plan, watch miraculously that most of the GOP will vote against it, and the bill is dead. But I'm just saying, he still has a hand on the GOP party, and it shows. Even more so, that's not the craziest thing Trump has said. He has said something today regarding the Republican National Convention that lets me think if this happens, they're pretty much his cult.
Former President Trump has endorsed his daughter-in-law to become one of the new leaders of the Republican National Committee. Trump wants Lara Trump to be the RNC's co-chair, and he's backing Michael Whatley, an election denier who heads the North Carolina GOP, to replace current RNC chair Ronna McDaniel. Last night, the RNC said McDaniel would not step down or announce future plans until after the South Carolina primary.
Yes. Y'all, let's think about this for a second. His daughter-in-law. I got nothing. I got nothing. His daughter-in-law. He wants his daughter-in-law to literally be the head of the Republican National Committee. What else can you say outside of this is how I guarantee that I'm going to get the nomination? This is how I guarantee that the funds that are available at the RNC can be used for my defense. And Nikki Haley, I'll give her credit to a certain extent. Nikki Haley sat there and said, if y'all allow this to happen, that money is going to be gone. And for once, she's right. Although I can't see Laura Trump being the head of the RNC, but at the same time, in Trump's eyes, the RNC is failing him. And who better else except someone he put, because he always picks the best people. Yeah, we've seen that by their mugshots. But I'm not surprised. At the same time, I would not be surprised if the RNC was headed by Trump. Because at that point, you can't talk, the GOP can't say they're not in control. You're merely now the lunatics run the asylum. But anyway, moving on for a second, because also hopeful, and I say hopeful, Republican presidential nominee, Nikki Haley, that's not her real name, has came out and sat there and said she thinks Biden should resign because he's too old. She sat there and says, I quote unquote think the Democratic Party knows that, and I think that it's just not in the best interest of their party. It's in the best interest of the company. What I will tell you, and I have said this from the very beginning, the party that gets rid of their any old candidate is the party that will win. We cannot have a country in disarray and a world on fire and have two presidential candidates in their 80s when we need someone who is going to put 8 years into making sure we have discipline, focused on getting our economy, the border, preventing war, and getting our country back on track. Now, keep in mind, this isn't the first time she has sat there and said that. She actually said that nearly 2 years ago. during hospitalization, during Biden's first couple of runs, first couple of years in his first presidential term. But Nikki Haley, I'm sorry, Nikki Haley, you do have a point to a certain extent. That, for the simple fact of the matter is, do we believe that, for lack of better words, should the president be too old? We've said there and said before. I think, being 80 years old, I mean, Biden was just trying to win because, let's be honest, at the time all you had was him and Trump. And I'm not saying Biden is perfect. Oh, he's definitely full of faults. With decisions that were made that I certainly disagree with, and definitely aired them out here on this podcast. But at the same time, is he too old? He's joked about his age, but I've said it before. Who else? And I always seem so amazed when people go, "Oh, well, that person running is too old." Okay, who's your alternative? Who is? You won't go with any other alternatives because you're not being told about them, or they choose not to run. Because the president from the Democratic side or Republican side, unless someone believes that they'll go against the grain and go against the mob, will actually run. Aside from that, how do you think President Biden got the nomination so easily? Nobody else is going to run against him. Even though you have a few outsiders, but let's be honest, they're not making dents. And Biden, for all of his faults, like I said, a lot of good decisions were made, a lot of bad decisions were made. But yes, I think at 80 years old, he might be a little too old to be president. But then again, this coming from the same people that, it's coming from the same White House that when Trump was president, that the chief medical officer sat there and said that Trump was fit to be president. Really? At that point, I'm questioning where you got your medical degree from. Because if you think that fat bastard is actually healthy enough to be serving as president, either your eyes need to be checked or your medical profession needs to be looked at. But Again, Haley is attacking Biden's age. She can't, because you know why she can't attack. You know why she's attacking? She's attacking his age because the only thing she can go for. Because again, she doesn't talk about her stances on abortion, even though she mentioned at one time that abortion should be pro-choice, and she hasn't said that anymore. She hasn't said anything about the economy, although every Republican presidential candidate always talks about the economy, but doesn't really have any actual grand ideas outside of cutting spending because they said the Democrats spend too much, but never produce a plan of their own. Don't talk about immigration because they treat it like a problem and not actual solutions. That's why you never see a plan from them. And again, the talk of the border is conservative buzzwords because conservatives want to know what you're doing at the border. What are we doing about these immigrants that are just coming in thousands, like America is full and we have the no vacancy sign on? Again, Nikki Haley has nothing to stand on because she has no plan forward. So what does she do? She goes for low-hanging fruit. She attacks Biden's age, and pretty much doesn't put her in the rise to second place sweepstakes. Because again, I only see Trump winning the nomination because, let's be honest, it's his cult. But speaking of people that want to go for second, America's Uncle Tom, Tim Scott, again, I think Tim Scott is basically taking the place of Kanye West. That's just my opinion. And what I mean by that is Tim Scott is going out and pretty much speaking on behalf of Trump, only in the hopes that Trump will pick him as his VP once he's nominated. Now, there is a strong chance because, again, the GOP's need to have the GOP's base doesn't need two white men. Either they need a woman or they need a person of color. And let's be honest, you're not going to find too many people that want to basically be Trump's VP in a losing battle. But Tim Scott believes, hey, this could be my way into the White House. And so he will sing, he will dance, he will shuck, he will jive, he will dance, he will entertain, he will be hyped for no reason. And at the same time, in the hopes that he's a pick-me. To that Tim Scott, I say, I hope you get everything that you deserve, you Sambo slinging individual. But with all that goes along in the race, who wants to be second? Meanwhile, like I said, the GOP hasn't done anything. Well, they might have actually done one thing, and it might have taken their entire term. They finally impeached impeached the director of Homeland. Again, I never can pronounce his name. I simply apologize. But let's just get to it, guys. They did actually impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, who again is the Secretary of Homeland. Again, not surprised.
The House has just concluded their vote on impeaching DHS Secretary Mayorkas. I understand it has passed. I want to go to Garrett, who's been monitoring this for us. Garrett Haig joins us now. Garrett, what can you tell us?
Tom, I'm waiting for final confirmation that the gavel has fallen here, but as it stands right now, this will pass. The impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas, the first cabinet secretary to be impeached in more than 100 years. Yes, the gavel has fallen, will be impeached, in fact, by a vote of 214 to 213. So as expected, the same three Republicans who opposed this impeachment joined with all Democrats in voting no, but the return of Steve Scalise, the majority leader, was enough, along with some other absences on both sides, to give Republicans the majority that they needed to impeach the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. Now, those articles of impeachment will now, at a point to be determined by the Speaker, go to the Senate, controlled by Democrats, where they will likely be fairly quickly dismissed. Do not anticipate a lengthy trial. Do not anticipate anything that looks like what we saw with the impeachments of Donald Trump. We know that these articles will not result in the removal of Alejandro Mayorkas, but they do, in this moment, result in his impeachment by the House, a major victory for Republicans in the House who desperately needed some victory to show their voters that they are up here doing some kind of work along the issues that they care about.
You phrased it in a very interesting way, right, Garrett? Because you set it up by saying it's going to fail in the Senate. Republicans likely knew this was going to fail in the Senate, and yet they chose to impeach the Secretary of the DHS anyway. Is this purely for sort of political points and to essentially embarrass the Biden administration?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Tom. This will not change personnel in the Biden administration, nor will it change policy. I think what this does is gives House Republicans a talking point. Having failed to turn immigration policy into law, they can at least go tell their voters that they are trying to hold the Biden administration accountable for what they believe are the Biden administration's failures to control the border. Now, we can talk about all the causes of that. We can talk about the manner in which House Republicans have tried to seek solutions on that issue. And having failed to do so, at least again, by creating law, they have passed a robust border security bill that has not received any consideration in the Democratic-controlled Senate. They will take this as a messaging victory, as hollow as it may be, lacking any other ability to substantively change the policies that they believe Alejandro Mayorkas is responsible for contributing to, and they believe were impeachment worthy.
All right.
Yes, that's it. And you know what? That's the wild part about all this is that all of this simply leads to nothing. Yes, the House did vote to impeach him. It moves on to the Senate, which is controlled by Democrats. Democrats will not impeach him, which means that it stops there. So hollow victory is right. And for what? And again, I point this out to the conservatives. What do you guys have to run on this year? Because you don't have any wins. You don't have any wins in the column. You don't have anything out there that says, yes, we can honestly stand on this. We impeached the Secretary of Homeland, and, well, we didn't really get him expelled. Senate didn't agree with us. But they'll treat it as a hollow victory. They'll treat it as that. And again, you have the American people who are in the middle of it going, we elected you guys, and you guys are getting paid to do nothing. Yeah, pretty much. And I keep on saying the entire time, why do you think it's so easy to be a politician these days, especially if you're conservative? Because you really get paid for doing nothing. But hey, that's not the craziest thing. The craziest thing is I was trying to tell people about the LGBTQ plus community that you don't think that they're coming for you next. They are in droves. What I mean by that is in Georgia looked at Florida's Don't Say Gay bill and was like, we could probably recreate this here, which they have done. They basically put a bill in that restricts teaching gender in private schools. What they have actually did, it's a proposal aimed at stopping private school teachers from talking to students about gender identity without parental permission, which again, gay rights groups and some religious conservatives remain opposed to the bill. The bill is called Senate Bill 88, which basically needs to have written permission from the parents before instructing addressing issues of gender identity, queer theory, gender ideology, or gender transition. The reason why they're trying to say this, one of the preparers of the bill said, quote unquote, we worked in earnest to make this bill fair while still achieving our goal of making sure children's parents are involved in a sensitive and often life-changing issue. In other words, this is Don't Say Gay Bill light. Now, granted, it's thrown at private schools, but still, imagine you are a member of the LGBTQ plus community. This is aimed at you. The same way it's aimed at Florida, the same way other religious states may actually try to do the same thing. And I keep pointing this out. That, again, outside of women outside of women who are voting this year, outside of minorities and the LGBTQ plus community, they are coming for all of you. Present company included, because I am a part of the minority, but they're coming for you. In the same sense where it's always the fear is we cannot talk about other preferences besides hetero. And I've never understood that, especially with kids, because you know what? Kids are the most understanding ones out there. And if you simply teach them to accept all, it's amazing how quickly they follow it. But you got those out there that believe that there's some sort of agenda to turn people gay. There's some sort of mandate. They always believe there's something vile and disgusting out there that's targeting our children instead of actually targeting public education, which needs to improve, instead of targeting the fact of nutrition, which needs to improve, which instead of us following the same rules same rules overseas and hold FDA to a certain standard to improve our way of food, that should be an issue. But at the same time, you're worried about the fact of, if a person in drag reads to my child, I feel like my child will turn to gay. No, they'll learn something. It's called inclusion. And that's not the only thing. Like I said, that's one bill in Georgia right now. There is another bill that, again, you thought this was crazy. You guys know right to work, right? You're like, in Tennessee, I'm in a right to work state. Right to work is bullshit, okay? Because they always try to make it seem like, oh, well, you can leave off the job anytime you want to, but a company can fire you for any reason outside discrimination. The second part is the actual first part. The second part is actually the real part, because let's be honest, you can go and leave a job however you please and accept the consequences that come with it. But if a job is going to fire you, that's the reason why outside of discrimination, that's what right to work is. But it has nothing to do with work. It just allows companies to fire you with no reason and therefore do not have to give you, and therefore can just sit there and say, oh, well, it's only because, actually they might dress up like this. Well, he's not working out, or he's not the candidate we thought he was. They'll say shit like that. But anyway, right to work is bullshit, right? Imagine, if you will, a women's Bill of Rights. Now, you're probably wondering, like, okay, is it going to codify abortion? It's going to codify that no law should be struck against a woman not having the rights of her own body? No. It is a bill that's now being seen in 3 different states, right? And other states, West Virginia, Iowa, and Georgia, that will have impacts on the transgender community, which, again, the proponents of the bill, and here's the thing that's crazy part of the bill, they're considering legislation. The Women's Bill of Rights is supposed to create legal definitions for a man and woman based on their reproductive system. Sound familiar? They try to do the Marriage Defense Act the same way. They tried the Marriage Defense Act. Remember that a long time ago, kids? Where marriage is defined as a man and woman being married? Yeah, they tried to pass that bullshit, didn't make it. So what are they doing now? They're trying to pass the Women's Bill of Rights to where it would create legal definitions for man and woman. You know what that does? If you create legal definitions for man and woman based on their reproductive system, you are basically alienating LGBTQ plus members. You are alienating them. You are sitting there saying that no matter how they identify themselves, you will go off their reproductive system, which means that, let's be honest, you know that fear they always have of somebody coming into the bathroom identifying themselves as something else out of fear or hurt or danger included people. Those same people, the same ones that wrote the bill that want to check a man or a woman that identifies himself. Well, let me see what you got down there. There's a twisted perversion to that. There's a twisted Law and Order SVU perversion to that. But even worse, if that bill passes, if that measure passes to where they have to have some sort of legal definition, then you're right. It's going to harm those LGBT plus. And I keep saying this, guys. I keep saying this. They are attacking you, and they're putting laws to prevent your way of life, because you know what? Your way of life as peaceful as it may be, irks people, and they can't sit there and be okay with it. So what do? They have to find some way, somehow, to turn around and make your life comfortable because they feel like they're on some righteous moral ground. Even more so, aside from the Bill of Rights, again, you have GOPs who have no problem speaking out because you know why? They have no fear of consequences. Take, for example, North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who sat there and said this, and yes, I can't make this up.
At a recent campaign stop in Cary, Republican gubernatorial frontrunner Mark Robinson said as governor, he would make it a priority to keep transgender men out of women's bathrooms.
If you're a man on Friday night and all of a sudden Saturday you feel like a woman and you want to go in the women's bathroom in the mall, you will be arrested.
That's an echo of House Bill 2, the notorious so-called bathroom bill that state lawmakers passed in 2016, regulating what restrooms transgender people could use. It sparked international fallout, including an economic boycott that cost the state billions of dollars in lost investments, jobs, and events. Still, Meredith College political scientist David McLennan wasn't surprised to see Robinson bring the issue up again.
There's a strong segment of the Republican base that this is a message that resonates with them. So I think he's throwing red meat to that particular part of his support.
McLennan says Robinson has a long track record of making anti-LGBTQ comments. He said that's likely to become an issue in the general election if Robinson wins his party's nomination next month.
He talks about dehumanizing people and making them unable to use bathrooms. That's, that may be too far for the average voter who might even be center right on this particular issue.
Robinson's Republican primary opponents, Bill Graham and Dale Folwell, criticized his comments. Mark Robinson is going to lose, and he will hurt all Republican candidates up and down the ballot if he's the nominee, said Graham spokesman Alex Baltziger.
So again, guys, it is amazing to me the level of brazen. And again, this isn't the first time because Mark Robinson also talked about civil rights. He also talked about civil rights movement actually harming of African Americans. That he believes before civil rights, African Americans actually had more rights than they did before the movement, which again is asinine. If you could, a simple Google search will prove that wrong. But the point I'm getting at is he is now saying that attacking the LGBTQ plus community, saying that trans women should find a corner instead of using women's restrooms, that he believes that a trans woman that uses a woman's restroom should be arrested because he says we are going to defend women. It always amazes me. So whenever you hear the GOP talk about we're going to defend women, and yet you are taking women's rights. You're saying that if they're saying a woman has a child and that if she does not want said child, you will force her to term. That you've pretty much made a woman nothing more than a breeding machine in her eyes. But when it comes to LGBTQ plus people, we had to protect and defend our women. That's bullshit. But again, it's Mark Robinson. Remember when I said a while back in this podcast that you have a few people who will literally and figuratively say or do anything to simply put for attention, for influence, for money, for power. He's one of them. Now, do I think he'll win his race? Depends. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. It really does depend. But at the same time, I keep saying that for those people that voted Democrat, they are coming after you. Even more so the last one I got, that another person who basically a principal whose side gig is as a drag queen decided that he had to resign from his Oklahoma school position because you had those on TikTok who followed him decide to harass the school system, and then death threats, bomb threats were called in to the point to where he just made the decision to go ahead and resign. Now, here's the crazy part. The superintendent is calling for a regulation that will allow educators to be fired for acts that exclusively promote sexuality outside of work. Are you kidding? Let me be honest. I'm going to be honest with you guys. First and foremost, I have no issue with drag queens at all. I think anybody that dresses in drag is brave. I think that they're hell of performers. At the same time, they have done way more than any conservative. Because Drag Queen Storytime Hour, I think my kids do it. I'll take my kids to it because number one, it's entertaining. Number two, it gets kids to read, and reading is fundamental. If you haven't seen from the latest generation that would rather watch Fox News and The Blaze or Candace Owens or Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk or any of those idiots, they would rather listen to them than read a book. If a person in drag decides to spend their time and read books to kids to get them excited about reading, I am all for it. I am all for the fact that they decide they want to entertain and make people smile and forget about the world for a few minutes. I'm all for it. But to sit there and say in Oklahoma that, hey, if your side job is promoting sexuality, then no, you can't work as a teacher. I'm sorry, that's kind of bullshit. Because number one, it's private. How else would they know what you do? It's like, you know what? I hate to say it like this. It's like educators or those in the educational system have OnlyFans pages. Who's going to know you're on OnlyFans unless they subscribe to you? Who's going to know? At the same time, how are they hurting children? A teacher had a side job as an OnlyFans because why? They weren't getting paid enough. She had to make ends meet. So she had an OnlyFans page. Come to find out, her OnlyFans page paid her more than her educational salary did. Does that mean that she gave up her job? No. She loved what she did. She loved teaching kids. At the same time, unless the parents of those kids had OnlyFans subscribed to her, how would they know about her side job? At the same time, how does it harm kids? How? That's the question I'm always asking whenever I hear these GOPs always talking about let's defend women, let's defend kids from sexuality acts. When, let's kind of be honest, every time you hear about a scandal or a mistress or a secret gay lover, isn't it always conservatives? The same people, the party of family values, always caught with their hand in the cookie jar? Them people? But yet you have the nerve to call out folks for no other reason outside the fact that they harm, I won't say harm. They make you feel uncomfortable about your way of life. That's all it is. And it's amazing to me how many times we have to sit here and endure it. We really do. So again, guys, I keep saying this, and I will remain to keep saying this, that when it comes to these elections, these votes, they're worried like shit about us. Because you know why? You guys have the ability to make their lives uncomfortable. And I sure shit hope you do it. But the last story we get to our feel good news segment is, again, another strike. And every strike that comes up, what usually happens? Better pay. And I'm going to be honest, this one's about flight attendants. If you thought getting pilots on board was bad, do you really want to tick off the people that keep the people in the plane in check while you're flying? I think not.
Of the sexism and low wages. So they will be demonstrating around the world today. The Association of Professional Flight Attendants says that the rally will be the largest collective action in the history of its organization. The worldwide day of action is being held to demand higher pay and an end to what they are calling legacy sexism. Our transportation reporter, Sam Sweeney, joins us now. So let's talk about the airlines, or I guess what airlines are involved here, and what exactly do the flight attendants hope to do through a demonstration? It's not a strike, right? They're not heading to the picket lines. It's just a massive demonstration.
Yeah, this is a protest, so there will be no impact to flight operations. If a flight attendant is scheduled to work today, they cannot participate in this protest. But this is a lot of people. 100,000 flight attendants are involved in this from 3 separate unions and 24 airlines, some very small airlines around the world to the big ones here in the United States. We're talking about American, United, Alaska, Southwest. And as you mentioned, they are fighting for better wages and better working conditions. A lot of people don't understand that flight attendants are not paid until the boarding door is closed and the parking brake is released. They're not paid when the flight is delayed, when they're boarding, when they're moving from one flight to another, or sitting in the airport for a delayed flight. And they are trying to change that. Some of these flight attendants say they have not received a pay raise in 5 years. And they are hoping to make a deal with the airlines, who have signed some pretty big contracts with the pilots over the last couple of years.
So why not strike, Sam?
Striking in the airline industry is tough. There are a number of hurdles to get through, mediation, and at the end of the day, the government can say you cannot strike. Back in the 90s, American Airlines pilots, they tried to strike, and the Clinton administration said no and sent them back to work. It's a tough hurdle to get through, but they will work and they will threaten to do something like that. But again, it's a long road ahead, Kira.
So yes, it's not a strike per se, but a day of action. Now, again, I always hate this part because yes, there are some jobs that it bugs me because if I remember correctly, pilots, air tower controllers, flight attendants, and I think I'm missing like three other key jobs. But because they are exclusive to the transportation system, they can't strike the way a guy like me can strike. Like at my job, if we all decide we can strike, we strike tomorrow. No ifs, ands, or buts. But for flight attendants, as you guys have heard in the story, that they can't simply just strike because again, the government can force them to go back to work. I mean, we actually saw that a little bit last year with the railroad companies on the West Coast, where Biden stepped in and was like, okay, we got this deal going, but we need you guys to go back to work because there's so much inventory and it's holiday season. We have so much inventory and it's holiday season, and these companies are basically paying us to keep us in office, so we need you guys to work. So again, I keep saying this, but flight attendants definitely endure a lot. They do. Now, granted, I haven't flown in a very long time. I actually have a very small fear of flying. But when I did fly, the attendants were very nice, very cordial. Made sure everybody was good. But I can understand the sexual harassment, especially if you're a woman and you're on a plane, or if you're a guy, or if you're on a plane and dealing with unruly passengers and turbulence and maybe flight crews that are not so friendly at the same time. And the other part, really not knowing about the fact of how the pay system works as a flight attendant. Wow. The fact that you don't get paid until everything's moving, that's messed up. At the same time, what is every time we've seen a proposed strike come up or about to strike come up, it's always the same thing. Better working conditions, pay. That's it. And again, it amazes me so that whenever it comes down to it, we talk about pay. Like, again, if you pay people, and I know we've said this many times in this podcast, if you simply pay individuals, the culture shifts. Everything changes for the better. And I'm not saying that's euphemism. I'm saying that that's what happens to our economy. When people are paid and they can actually not have to worry about bills. And I'm not saying millionaires, but you're not working two jobs to break even. You're actually getting ahead a little bit. You can actually save for a car, or save for a house, or save for an education if that's what you choose to do. The times that Americans could actually put some money away and actually feel good about it, that's the times when we've done well as an economy, economy-wise. Right now, we're not. We are not. And yes, you can sit there and say the jobs are out there. You can say the employment rate is down, but I can honestly say that people are still struggling. Some people are 1 or 2 paychecks away from poverty. That's saying a lot. But at the same time, if you're a flight attendant, then yes, you should be paid. Again, this goes back to the same pool of everything else. Whether you're a flight attendant, whether you're an educator, whether you're a nurse, whether you're a UPS driver, you want the job that you're working, that you're giving your all to be able to sustain you with a roof over your head, clothes on your back, food on your plate, utilities, things of that nature. It should be done. And should flight attendants get paid? I don't think get paid. I really hope they strike and halt flights to prove a point. I really hope they do that. If the brasses, if the CEOs of airliners don't get it because they're too busy trying to make sure that mass transit systems doesn't happen. But I digress. But we're going to go and move on to our feel good segment, guys. As usual, how the Frack We Got Here, we usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes makes you faith in humanity, but hey, it's hump day. It's Valentine's Day. Love is in the air. Hopefully, if you have a Valentine, let them know how you feel, let them know how you care, and have a lovey-dovey. If you don't have a Valentine, then hey, at least there's the 15th, and everything's off half price. And you can enjoy some half price candy. But that being said, guys, we will leave you on some good vibrations. Hopefully the story will do that, because I try to, for Black History Month, really try to highlight Black people, even though they give us the shortest freaking month out the year. It's always Black 365, and I love stories like this that say that we can definitely be more than what we are, and we're surely not our ancestors.
And a Maryland couple is making history and wine. Janelle and Matthew Boyd are the creators of the state's first Black-owned family winery, and they say it's their mission to bring their community together to tip their glasses and enjoy some locally made wines. And Janelle and Matthew Boyd of Crew Wines are joining me now for more. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
So, Janelle, African Americans have a long-standing history with winemaking. Why was that so important to you, and how did that inspire Crew Wines?
Sure. So, absolutely, the history of African Americans and winemaking actually goes back to 1933 with John June Lewis Sr., who was actually the first Black African American winemaker right next door in Clarksville, Virginia. And doing our research, learning that, understanding that, combined with our own history of entrepreneurship in both of our families, really inspired us to step out here and start making wine and learning more about winemaking and how we can bring something special to our community.
Now, Matthew, that's a history we don't often hear about, but you actually incorporate that history into your wine tastings and your classes. How does that work?
We do. And one of the things that, is really interesting for us is always being able to show people, one, how to make great wines and how the process goes, and telling people about not just the history of African American owned wineries, but also that our own history with winemaking. My first time making wine was actually with my grandfather. He learned from his parents how to make wine. And he literally ordered grapes from California, ordered a oak barrel from California, a French oak barrel. And my sisters and brothers and I, we helped him make wine right there in his own kitchen. He would give wine out to his sons and daughters the following year as a Christmas gift. So, incorporate that history into our tastings and telling people about how not just we're making wine, quote unquote, for our community, but we're really wanting to make wine so people understand the process, what goes into the wine, why we chose the certain grapes that we chose, specifically utilizing grapes that grow extremely well here in Maryland.
My grandfather used to make wine in his kitchen, too. You're just giving me a little bit of nostalgia myself. I'm sure a lot of people feel that way when they go to visit the winery. And exactly. Janelle, you started this company during the pandemic, and it was, it was a small venture, just you two. Now your wines are taking off. They're set to head to Target in the D.C. area. So talk to me about what's next for your brand.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a wild ride, very quick and very fast. But we're really excited about how the growth that we're incurring. Most excited about the fact that our community is excited about our wines. They truly enjoy them. Our Free Spirit Rosé, sold out last year in July after we had, first started in April. And what's next for us is really to continue to make great wine, to expand, our company and our brands. And then we are looking to, open a tasting room as well as a community. It'll also dual as a community marketplace for other small business owners to get in front of their customers and to truly build community as well.
All right, Janelle and Matthew Boyd of Crew Wines, thanks so much for coming on. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
And again, guys, I love stories like that because, again, to be the first Black family-owned wine company in Maryland, definitely congrats to Janelle and Matthew Boyd. Because a guy like me is trying to learn wine, but apparently I've been told I like sweet wines, but that's neither here nor there. But that's gonna do it for this podcast. I do thank you all for liking, for watching, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. As always, guys, like, share, subscribe, let people know about this. The whole mission of how the Frack We Got Here is to inform people. We are not trying to do anything else but that, to get you informed, to get you aware of the world and everything else around you, to get involved, because once you're aware, it's hard to go back to not knowing. It really isn't. At the same time, like I said, it's Valentine's Day. Again, I want to shout out to my Valentine Kelly, who has put up with me, who has been around me, who has provided children, who has said yes because she was crazy. She was crazy to say yes when I asked her to marry me. I love you, honey, from the bottom of my heart. I don't just want to celebrate Happy Valentine's Day just as your day, but every day to show that I cherish you. I am grateful for you. I am thankful for you, and that I love you. And I will never not be ashamed to say it. I will be completely shameless in how I pretty much confess my love and adoration and admiration and just my awe of you, if you will. So had to get that out, guys, because like I said, keep the wife happy. Keep the wife happy, you live. Anyway, so shameless plug before we do get out of here, guys. I always do want to shout out first and foremost my buddy Vaughn at Big BZA Dot. You can definitely find him there, Big BZA Dot, on social media for beats and his beats page on YouTube. As for me, guys, you can find me Blackbox447 on all the socials. I usually do reviews on everything, as well as video games and gym stuff because I like to stay in shape. The link at the bottom, guys, make that a wee bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, check your link tree. That's YouTube and Facebook groups for all of our podcasts. How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit, off of this podcast. Again, like the Facebook groups, share the Facebook groups, like the YouTube pages, share the YouTube pages. And again, also, we're also on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever podcasts can be seen or heard. Definitely spread the word, guys, because again, we cannot do this without you. And also, guys, definitely check out blurredstation.com. You've heard me talk about this for the last couple of weeks. It is the new wave. It is where you can find stuff that is for us and by us, people of color and blurs themselves. Again, it's $10.99 to join, guys. If you do decide to join, please select the Blurred's Eye Few Amenity membership. Anybody under the influencing member you can select, whether it be myself or others. But again, guys, definitely check it out. Again, at 36 months, $10.99, you do have the ability to own a piece of Blurred Station. It's a whole hell of a lot easier trying to own a piece of Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, or Amazon Prime. I'm just saying. That also being said, guys, again, we're getting, even though it feels like this, it's still February, but let's be honest, in a couple of months, it'll be March. And then from there on and so forth, we'll find ourselves in the middle of another year again. Guys, I cannot stress this enough. Know the candidates you are voting for. Get to know what they stand for, their issues, what they hopefully will align with. If they align with you, then great. If not, then hey, question them, get answers, hold them accountable. At the same time, guys, there are plenty of sites out there that will show you how to run in your own home, in your own city or state if you choose to, if you think that you definitely can be a public servant. So I hopefully implore you guys to do that, because like I said, once you're aware and once you get involved, it's hard to go back to not knowing. But with that being said, guys, last thing to say about How the Frack We Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a lot of perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better when we're progressive. We're basically trying to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first black woman to the federal, electing our first black woman Supreme Court, electing our first black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first black woman as a cybersecurity advisor. All great things. We don't learn from history. We are doing to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go about our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack We Got Here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Please take care of yourselves and each other. We'll all get through this.